Hi, Bernie.
Hey,
How's it going?
good. How are you?
I'm good. I just realized my sweater matches the book, and
Nice. You're
this is
you're
always
accessorizing.
accessorizing without realizing. And this has been here for a while, but it's so timely with
All right,
what we're
right.
talking about.
And I happen to grab this shirt and it says "Wilderness begins in the mind."
Love it.
That's it.
We're right
I
on
didn't
brand.
didn't even know I had that on until like 10 minutes ago.
Well, I kind of dove headfirst into what you sent me over.
Okay.
Um, and wow, I have like a bunch of notes and stuff, but um,
Great, great,
I'm
because I
just
have
happy.
none.
What'd you say?
I said great because I have none.
Great. And they're pretty low key. They're just to kind of guide us a little
Right.
bit. But
Yeah.
you've been on before. We were talking about
Yeah.
your book, which is right
Yeah.
here, which we're going to reference again, but in
Yeah.
a slightly different way, a different tone of how it came to be, and also how you're giving back at this season. And I just, you came on before talking primarily about creativity and writing a book and just what that all looks like and what it means to wonder. And we never really got into the why you even started writing it. And for anybody who has your book, they know right straight from the gate, because you do it in this really imaginative way with the fictional character Harry.
Yeah. Head trauma
And
Henry.
yeah, and I just feel like, having you on right now for focusing on traumatic brain injury is something that people might be surprised to know. And I'm just wondering, before we even jump in, what's your temp around discussing something so personal?
That's actually a really, really good question because I think the answer to that is that in the past, it's been a sensitive subject, even though it's in the book and it's the purpose of the book, and it's in chapter 1. I mean, it's the whole setting of the scene of the book. Um, it's always been a bit sensitive, and until I wrote the book, I think it became less and less sensitive. Um, and I've become much more open to discussing it. And I think even recently, like even after writing it I wrote it and published it be about 2.5 years now. And I would say in the 2 years past writing it, it was a sensitive subject. Um, and as COVID started, I was writing more and more and more and more and more and more and more, and it just like it snowballed to the point where like I was writing a lot of stuff that didn't involve head trauma at all, and then it kind of seeped its way in, and it brought me to a point realizing that you know that's not something to hide from. uh I need to, not that I need to confront it, I've confronted it for so long. I think it just got to a point where I knew what I had gone through can help other people. And I happened to find a charitable organization that has been doing this for uh, over 10 years, I think, is an accurate statement. And I wish I knew, or I wish I had a resource like that, like them. And I found it organically. I found like everything they do, I kind of do. Like I found that along the way, and it's helped me. And I was like, everything I read from these guys, I'm like, wow, I like, how did I find that, on my own? It took me 20 plus years to figure some of that stuff out. Um, and so that's I guess that's the whole story of where I am now and why I'm doing what I'm doing.
And it sounds, from everything you said, it sounds like it ended up being, yes, it's going to be helping so many people just from being able to shine a light on this topic that a lot of people are uninformed about, with good reason. Because if you're not personally affected in some way, that's when that's when we become more
Right.
invested in specific advocacy, right? So, but it sounded like it was becoming
Absolutely.
more draining, holding back on sharing it than it did on sharing this part of your story.
Yeah, yeah, I think that could be accurate.
Draining might not be the right
Yeah,
word, but it just like more, it took more energy to hold it in. And then you
yeah,
were able to, that's what I'm getting from you. And then you were able to talk
yes,
about it and it was like,
I was dancing around it for a long time,
yeah.
and once I went, right into it, um, and I'm writing a book now, and like I said, it seeped into it, and it's kept coming back into it, and now it's more about the mind than it is about anything else,
Mhm.
which I didn't expect, and
Mhm.
that's, it's therapeutic, but it's also exceptionally surprising,
Sure.
you know, for that to happen. Yeah. But yeah, draining might be a good word for it. It might be, because it was definitely freeing to go right at it.
Mhm. And
Yeah.
there's a timeline, right? There's a reason that maybe you did wait for so long till you realize that as uncomfortable as you thought it would be, it actually wasn't as. And being able to help other people oftentimes gives us that drive because then it makes it not as much about us. And if we're holding back our story, we're actually doing a
Absolutely.
disservice to other people who could be benefiting from it. So you've been super gracious just from behind the scenes when you've been emailing about wanting to share your story. So I just want to give you the chance now just to share your experience with TBI and how that affected you.
Yeah, it's been a journey. Um, and I mean, I'll tell you, it happened in the year 2000. I was living in Boston at the time, and I was training for a marathon. And part of my training for that marathon was cross training, and I used to bike around the Charles River quite often. I used to bike to, I worked on the Charles upper part of the Charles River, so I used to bike all the time, and I never wore a helmet. Um, and it says, I think it says in the book, in the beginning of the books, I felt invincible, and it's not so much you feel like you can't, uh yeah, you just can't get hurt, in that situation. It's like, yeah, I'm riding my bike, it's not that, dangerous, it's a bicycle or whatever. But I just was on a bridge, and I fell, and I hit the right side of my head. I fractured my skull. I had a seizure at the accident. Um, and thankfully, someone was nearby when it happened, um, who happened to be a registered nurse, which is like, go figure, right? And I always look back on these little details of the story, and I think of how lucky I was. And that is one of those points that always comes up. Another one is that it was on it was on one side of the Charles River, directly across from Mass General Hospital, which is where I ended up staying for, I believe, 7 days. Um, I was knocked unconscious. I was unconscious for over 24 hours. Um, I was actually missing for a short period of time. I didn't have ID on me. And at that time, it wasn't like, you didn't bring your cell phone everywhere. Um, they ended up finding out who I was through, I had like a little card thing on my keys, and I think it was for Blockbuster or something. And that's how they found out who I was. Um, and it's always been difficult to talk about those points because of what I put my family through is the most difficult thing to revisit. Um, and once I'm tearing up thinking of that, but once I get past that and think about, where I've gone since then or where I've come from, um, it's just, it opens it up a lot more. Like I said, I was exceptionally lucky in a lot of respects. Um, and I eventually left the hospital after 7 days. And I've recently been asking my family a lot of questions about that because I don't remember much about that time at all. Um, I have a story about like when I woke up and saw my family and my friends, which is I s- they knew it was me in there. So and that was exciting for them because I made a joke and it was a really bad joke. um, I actually, and I'll just say, I pretended not to know who my mom was, which is absolutely awful, right? Like I actually like named people and I went back and I said, "Now who are you again?" And I was totally joking, and but everyone like, and I started laughing, and everyone kind of brightened, everyone, it lightened the mood quite a bit, but still a total asshole move to make by me, and I hate that I did that. But I'm probably telling you a lot more than you need to know. But then past that, I went through several months of speech therapy. Um, and let me back up for a second. A traumatic brain injury, the result of that, it creates gaps, is what it does. And so you have to learn how to reconnect those gaps. And so there were certain things that I had to relearn, like things from kindergarten, and it was just, it was a lot of grammatical stuff. It was, speech and remembering and learning how to reconnect those tools, but reconnect in a new way. Like you're not going to reconnect exactly the same way. You will through some of the recovery, but even to this day, I have little gaps that aren't complete yet. And what is really important is like this organization, Love Your Brain, which we'll get into. They help you realize that those bridges to make, or how to make those heal those a little bit easier over time. And it's a lot of it's through meditation and mindfulness and stuff like that, um, which I didn't get into until years after my therapy. Um, but the speech therapy lessons, I always go back to those. I go back to those in my mind all the time, and I think about them. And one of the most interesting things is, and I remember the speech therapist telling me this. She says, once you relearn some of this stuff, you will forget 90% of it, which kind of threw me off. Like, what does that even mean? Well, you're reconnecting to your instincts. And as we know, is like instincts is all stuff that you kind of forget about. Like you don't put a focus on that stuff. So it's more of a, and it's exactly what happened. So I like all those little things about the English language that are kind of weird and odd and we just take for granted because we learned them so long ago. Like all that stuff vanished within months after me doing the therapy. And I always look back, I'm like always fascinated by that fact, right? Um, but yeah, but moving past that, I spent 9 or 10 months not driving. I wasn't allowed to drive because of the seizure. Um, and uh, at the surface, probably 6 months or even earlier than that, on the surface, I probably appear completely healed. And that's the mystery of TBIs. Um, is that at the surface, that's how you come across. But beneath, in where you've injured yourself, is where the real work is. And that takes a lot of time, or took me a lot of time. Um, and again, I was lucky to not have a worse injury. I was lucky to come out of the being unconscious without further issues or anything like that, and I was able to do this path. But yeah, the there was a lot of work to be done and a lot of connections to reconnect to over the years. Um, I'm not sure where else we go from there, but that gives you a good idea of what I went through, what the injury was, uh, and how TBIs are really that mystical injury that just doesn't go away. It's not. It's like some of those secrets way back in your closet, that you just don't give. You don't lose them. You confront them. You become respectful of them, and then you move on.
There's so much there. And thank you so much for being so honest and detailed and intimate about the whole thing played out like a movie. You could definitely even see the scene when you do see your family as that comic relief. Of course, you choose the one person,
I know. I know.
not cousin Jerry, but mom, but um, you could totally see that in a movie scene. I mean, you just wrote a movie scene. Someone's watching this and they're like, oh, I'm taking that verbatim. That you still had your humor is huge, that you were able to tap into that without
Right.
thinking. It innately is within you. And that just that sense of love for your family, like not even just about what you went through, but like, oh man, I put them through just such a nightmare. And chances are they're not looking at you like that. And at the same time, it makes so much sense that you would have that heaviness about it. And, when you were talking about it and having it play out, you referenced in your book, when you go through your story in the beginning, that it helps you to look at it objectively like a movie. What is it about
Yeah.
looking
Yeah.
at it from that space that helps you? Is it within the healing? What is it that's helpful?
It's interesting you brought that up. Because I forgot all about that. And I think what that does is it softens the focus of all of it. Um, where even though the book is about the little things, it's the little things that lifts our spirit is what we should be paying attention to.
And that we take for granted.
And what we take for granted.
Yeah.
But it's all the other stuff that gets in the way, is that those are the things that should fall outside our peripheral vision, and even though we're broadening focus and stepping back, those other things should just fade away. So we're not focusing on those as much. So I think that's why I wrote it that way.
Mm-hmm.
I think in the past, I would probably say I wrote it that way to distance myself from it. And it does help me to look at it that way. Without it, it's helped me look at it that way without me knowing why. Um, so yeah, it's interesting that I did that. Now that you mention it, I'm totally surprised that I did it that way.
Well, there's something that seems very instinctual to that, because on a much, much smaller scale, you're into, and we're going to dive right into Love Your Brain right in a minute. That organization, I looked it up, it's phenomenal. And the founders have their own incredible story, like unbelievable. In regards to looking at it objectively, that's one of the key components. Dan Siegel, who does all, like his whole life is neuroscience and development, child development, human development. And he calls it mind sight, which is that objectivity, being able to see your mind. So on a much smaller scale, that is a strategy and a tool to be able to get yourself out of the immersion of feeling intense feelings. It's like, okay, label what you're feeling so that you give yourself a little bit of space so that you could be more objective to it, which sounds like on a much smaller scale what you are doing with your story, giving yourself that space so that you could, and you didn't consciously do it, but to be able to
Right.
see it more objectively so that you weren't so in it. Because who knows that could have totally just swallowed you
Oh,
whole,
yeah, yeah,
you
it
know?
definitely could have went down a completely different path. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think, um, I think I was very lucky to have creativity in my back pocket, so to speak. You know, I've been drawing and whatever, like, my whole life, and, you know, I've been in that field my whole adult life. And so I think it helped me a lot to look at it from a different perspective, and be able to jump outside of myself and look back. And I think that's really important in that kind of a recovery, or any kind of recovery really, is to kind of look at it as in chunks rather than little individual things. Like I even look at like periods of my life as different lives, you know, like, and I think of that person 20 years ago who was riding a bicycle, that's someone else to me. Yeah, which is kind of a weird way to look at it, but I do look at it that way because I'm so different now. I think that's probably why.
I think it's so healthy. I don't think it's weird at all. I mean, I feel like people who've
Good,
never
thank
had,
you.
well, you're also talking to a fellow creative. So, but still, I mean,
Right, right.
I feel like there are acts to our life, right? There's an act one, there's an act two, there's an act three. They talk about it all the time, like
Yes.
0 to 30, 30 to 60, 60 to 90, or
Yeah.
beyond. But what you're saying, you know, I wonder, because even just in general, looking back on life, there's a tendency I even have for having this. I almost look at myself 20 years ago like a younger sister or a daughter, like just
Right,
like,
right.
oh, you were
Yeah,
so young,
yeah,
like they're like, and then it allows me to, in my own way, have so much more self-compassion for myself than I would have if I looked at it as myself. So me pulling it out a little bit and looking at her as like, oh, you had so much to learn, and not this pitying, but
yeah.
just like, oh, you were doing the best you could.
Right,
Like you
right.
riding your bike, you're doing the best you could at that time with the tools you had,
Yeah, yeah.
you know? And I want to throw this to you because I would think that people who have had just traumatic moments in their life, I just wonder what your connection or relationship is with this phrase. I feel like it's either grating or else it's, yeah, totally. That everything happens for a reason. Does that make you cringe and or does that make you like, yeah, I see that? What's your relationship
Uh,
to that?
I do, and I think I think I say that at the very, very end of the book, that I don't believe in coincidences. You know, everything does happen the way it should, and when you look at it like in that more objective way. Um, yeah, and I look at the TBI as a chapter, and it happened the way it did for a reason. Um, and you know, I think I had this book in here somewhere, and I wrote it to help other people go through whatever. And now it grew into more of like, somehow I want it to help giving back to that community,
Mhm.
um, understanding, you know, the gaps that we can try to fill. Um, but yeah, I completely agree with that statement. Yeah, and
Yeah,
I don't cringe at all.
I've
Yeah,
heard both from people who've had very traumatic situations happen. I've heard both. So I always wonder because I do think it's really subjective, and I'm with you. I don't think there are coincidences. Um, I hope I still have that, if, you know, if or when something intense happens in my life, that's what
right,
you hope. It's easy to do when you're hanging out in a closet, having a conversation with you and
right,
everything's
right,
copacetic. But,
right.
you know, I can't help going back to just the way my thought is that nurse that happened to be the only person there,
Yeah,
angel, like literally that's when I really, I do,
absolutely.
I'm not a religious person, I'm definitely spiritual, and when that happens I was tearing up right there with you, and I was just like, holy crap, that is an angel in human form.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've called her an angel for years. I call the speech therapist an angel too, because I think she was. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm the same way. I'm not religious, but I've become more and more spiritual over the years. And like I said, I always look back and I think of like, you know, I say lucky, but I don't know how much I believe in the luck side of it. I would never consider myself a lucky person, but I do attach luck to that person being there. And is if it's them being an angel, if that's luck, that so be it. But I do view them in that way. Yeah.
And I can't help but think too, Bernie, is like, so with what you're saying about luck, it's also this idea that comes to me of you were saved in a way. I don't know what else to say, but like you were healed, you were saved, you were brought back into the world so that you had more to contribute. Right. And so from this experience, I do feel like the book coming from it is huge. And now you being able to shine a light within traumatic brain injury, the advocacy for it, the services for it, the Love Your Brain, which we're going to jump to right after. I want to highlight something in your book first. There's you have more to you. I can't imagine coming back from something like that and not saying, like, having it light a fire under your ass in a way. What, even if it's not immediate, at some point, like right now, where all of a sudden you're like, all right, my passion is fired up. I'm like absolutely all chips on helping raise awareness here. I can't see that not happening at some point. Right. And with your book here, one of the things that you talk about too is how after your traumatic brain injury, you had these like just such sharp, colorful flashbacks to your childhood that was in a way the impetus for this book. Absolutely. Can you just shine a light on that experience and what that was like?
I mean, you talk about like writing scenes for movies like that. That's how it felt. It felt like I was watching movies. And at some point, I don't really remember when this was, but it was, pretty much right after the injury. I would just have these flashes of my childhood. And it would, almost all of them would be in nature. I was a very active kid, catching frogs and, chasing fireflies and skipping rocks. And, I was always out in nature. We lived in the country. And that's when it was okay to just roam around everywhere. And so that's what was coming back to me. And I would have these flashes and I would remember that they were so vivid. And I think I say in the book, they were like lucid dreams to me. And I used to call my father up and say, did this happen? And sometimes he would be able to confirm it or not, because obviously he wasn't with me all the times as a kid. But I totally relived those experiences. And what that reminded me was the ability to wonder over the world, that's the way you view the world as a child. Everything is so grand and big, and I think that helped me in the grand scheme of my recovery too, because the same type of thing, it allows you to take that step back and look at things on a larger scale, and that you're part of something bigger than yourself. And that's one of the hardest things after the injury, is that you tend to focus on all those little things that are wrong. And that's what, mindfulness and yoga and all that stuff does. It helps you step outside of all of that. So I hope that answered the question. All right.
So that is such a great segue when you're talking about something bigger than yourself, with you being able to lead yourself into really, you organically found Love Your Brain, which is a nonprofit. I did my research. It was started in 2014 by, I have it right here, snowboarder Kevin Pierce and his brother Adam. after Kevin had a near-death experience while on an Olympic training run in Utah, I think he was.
Yep.
And it's a nonprofit that's on a mission to improve the quality of life for those affected by TBIs, bring overall awareness on brain health through yoga, meditation, community building. And if people are interested in learning more about Kevin Pierce's story, there's a documentary made called The Crash Reel that they can watch. But you finding this organization organically makes so much sense, because it seems like at the time you find it when you're ready, right? At the time, you probably weren't ready. Now you're able to do that more and more, pull back of, I'm giving back full on, and I want to raise awareness, and I want to remind myself that I'm, something, a part of something bigger than myself.
Right.
And when you were talking about it getting so intricate in the details, the first thing I thought of was the interview that I listened to with Kevin, where he was like, you can't help but feeling totally hopeless. You're just in total despair because you're so in it. Can you speak to just your relationship with how you were feeling? Maybe, was it hopelessness? Was there any glimmer of hope when you were in the thick of it?
I think I had, overall, I think I'm somehow instinctually a positive person. And I think that I put my head down and I just moved forward. I didn't question a lot of stuff through my recovery. I became laser focused on getting past it. And that's probably why I didn't seek out organizations like this at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I think I had glimmers of hopelessness. And that seeps in here or there over the years. And, I could look back on things like that and focus on them here or there and find where that was definitely apparent. But I don't think, I think I was lucky in that respect, because I have something in me that just drives me past it, or keeps me going. And it wasn't until recently that I looked back and realized that what I went through was really freaking hard, and it still is, and I think we always are trying to improve ourselves. At least I am. And trying to I'm losing my train of thought. I lost that. Sorry.
You don't have to apologize. That was, that's,
Can you edit that part out?
we will edit it out. All right, Cole, while you're watching this, edit it out. Well, no, but it makes
Actually,
sense.
you might want to leave it right in there, because that is part of the issue. Like, sometimes my mind just wanders, man. It just goes. And I will go off on a tangent and not find my way back. And I think other people do that don't have TBIs. But when you do have one, you think back like, well, shit, I guess I didn't recover from that, right? So there are those reminders, like when stuff like that happens, the reminders, like, they become what you focus on. And then you have to take a step back again and breathe again and figure that out. So yeah, it seeps back in. Yeah.
And I would find it difficult to differentiate between being a creative and daydreaming by nature, and then TBI being in corporate, like which one, like, so you could go there and get like, which one is it? Or you could just go again. So bringing back to Love Your Brain, I want you to share your story with finding it and what you love about it. And we'll dive in there.
Sure.
It makes so much sense that there's so much mindfulness connected in regards to self-compassion, non-judgment, and more. Up there it went, and now I'm back. Instead of falling into it like, oh my gosh, if I didn't have this happen, remember, you could just be quicksand. So it's just this practice to just keep coming back, and seems that it would be beneficial for everybody in their own right. And at the same time, as part of the healing process for those that were affected, by TBI, it makes sense. It makes total sense.
Yeah.
So can you just share your experience, anything that you want to share to highlight Love Your Brain?
Well, just to talk about how I found out about them, I watched Crash Reel when it came out, which it came out like in 2009 or 2010 or something like that, right after. I think his accident was 2009. So it came out pretty much right after that. Like they filmed that, like he was as good as Shaun White. Like
Wow.
he was that good. Like they had competitions where he'd win one and then Shaun would win one and then he'd win one and Shaun would win one, and like they were competitive. And so for this to happen, like he was going to be in the Vancouver Olympics in 2010. And so for this to happen, like it it killed his career, to put it bluntly. And I watched it, like it just like they documented so much, and then it happened. So they had all this footage of him leading right up to that accident and then his recovery afterwards. And so like I saw it was on HBO, and it might still be on there. So I saw that back then, and it like was like reliving my own injury. It was hard to watch. And he went through something way worse than I did. He was in the hospital for like 4 months. So he is a true miracle. Like for him to be here and being as involved as he is, it's a true miracle. And now his brother actually quit his job at the time, and went to help him in the hospital and became his caregiver. So that's why the two of them started this company, was through that connection, which I think is exceptionally cool. And this wasn't that long ago, I was kind of searching for a charitable organization to give to and work with. And it just kind of popped into my head, like, whatever happened to Kevin Pierce? Because I know he started this Love Your Brain foundation. And I think at the time when he started it, it wasn't in the yoga and mindfulness stuff. Like he started it, but I don't think it was quite there yet. And so when I looked it up, I was like, holy cow, I couldn't believe like how far it's gone. It's pretty much, I think, in the US and Canada.
Yeah, that's what I saw too.
And they bring their expertise into cities around the country, and bringing the yoga practice into those communities. They also, promote TBI awareness, prevention, and when I was reading all that stuff about mindfulness and yoga and oddly enough community, right? And like I haven't really been part of that community. I've done my own thing, and serendipitously I was looking for a community to be involved in, so that it all kind of blended for me not too long ago. And then I had the idea to take all the profits from the book from Thanksgiving to New Year's and give to them. But I also said, you know what, I don't think that's enough. I don't sell that many books. So I also started the page to donate directly, which I'm about halfway to my goal with that.
And the page is connected. It's so findwonderintheordinary.com is the website, right?
Yeah, you can get to it right off of findwonderintheordinary.com. That's the easy way to do it. And you can also go to where to buy the book the same way.
All one-stop shop, as they say.
One-stop shopping for all their Christmas needs.
Yeah, and it's such a great time because people really, I know that I like to give to different organizations every year. I used to go to the same one every year, And then I was like, no, every year I'm going to go with wherever I'm at that year. And
Great
and
idea.
we all want to be able to volunteer and help out, especially this time of year it comes through, especially when you feel very, very fortunate and
Mhm.
grateful. And this is such a wonderful way to do both, because you can be sharing this book with, I mean, you can give directly for sure. And at the same time, like, such a great stocking stuffer to be able to have this book to just wake up people's spirit. And, I've said this before when you were on too, it's just these awesome, there's so much in it. So it's quick bits. So you can just do a quick, like, shh, and then just read whatever, spiders just came up for me here. But it's,
Yeah.
it's quick bits that you can just get to just remind yourself, just to, it's like a refresher to me. So, like, this is the one I just turned to, which I'm going to highlight. You can't see it because of the light, but I call it Eat, Pray, Love. Get it? Prey. So there's just these fun, it's light, it's humorous. And then there's the thing I love is that it's really fun because of the illustrations. And there's so much insight without being preachy in all of the writing. And then each chapter starts with a quote, whether it's from someone who's a public figure or someone in your life, or there's a guy at a bar, I think in
Yeah.
Montana or somewhere,
Yeah.
and there's so many bits within it. And it's just such a great reminder to bring ourselves back, to be present, to be able to do it in a way that's fun. Like, it doesn't have to be present on a mountaintop. And the connection to being able to give back at the same time is just so huge. And I want to also, let me hold on one sec. Let me just see here.
Well, thank you for all that. The praise of, all your words, all that. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate you doing this, if I haven't said it yet. Like, I'm very, very grateful for this opportunity. So,
Well, you're so welcome. And thank you for making the opportunity happen. That's the point too. It's like, that's what this whole thing is about, is the more we can take out of the closet our story, then we are able to feel more connected to people. And it brings to light to other people, whether they're watching in upstate New York, or if they're in California, or if they're in Colorado, and they feel less alone.
yeah.
There's an artist who may have some connection to TBI in some way, who might feel somewhat shame about it, or embarrassment, or
Right. Right. And that's
super
really,
lonely.
yeah. Yeah. That's
And then they
really
see
why I
this
want
and they're
to.
like, holy crap. Or they never knew about Love Your Brain,
Right.
and you're shining the light there, and everybody says that, the phrase that often comes along with teaching, which is, to connect with one student is all that matters. You hear that sometimes, and it's
Mhm.
like, I always say it's never one student, it's never
Right.
one person, because that person, then the next person they talk to, they're connected with, and their hopes are up, so they bring a better version of themselves to the next person, whether it's a waitress or their mom, and
Right.
so
Right.
it really does matter. So thank you. It's a mutual, I just want to be able to highlight this for you because of what you're doing. Um, and I would, I would love to close out with understanding the power of creativity. We tapped into it a little bit,
Mhm.
but what you said about having creativity be a lifeline for you to get you through this, just this part of your life and beyond, for sure. What was it about being able to tap into creativity that really helped you stay afloat?
Um, it might be a difficult thing to answer because I think creativity is so odd. It's so it's such a intangible thing, and but I always say to myself, you know, anything within creativity is like, it's where all possibilities are possible, right? So that's where my drawing comes from. That's why I draw the way I do. It's like I just conjure up these characters or whatever, because I go someplace where it's possible to do that, right? um and I think you can relate that to, recovering within in your mind because it is about achieving impossible things, or not viewing things as possible, and learning how to change your perspective. All that stuff, all those tools that I had gathered up along the way, I think probably contribute to me getting past a really difficult time.
And there was so much to it because it was the flashbacks to your childhood, which is within itself creative because that's your imagination, right? Bringing back things,
Right,
even you're
right, right.
imagining them, you're not making them up, you're just revisiting them and imagining them. Being able to write the book, super cathartic too. And music was such a huge part for you, being able to,
Sure,
you
sure.
flashing back to like what you used to listen to and what you're listening to now. And you said something in here that I love that is, I just think it's so uplifting. It's slightly unrelated to what we're talking about. I think it's so, it just inspired me. I had like this boost of inspiration. So you were talking about concerts and you said in the chapter about music, you said, some people take in the energy of their surrounding, which is why I'm usually not a fan of crowds. But everything shifts when I'm at a live show. This is it. Everyone is there for the same purpose, so the energy is shared. And if it's a show where everyone is singing along, or even if everyone is truly engaged, it can create an energy that, if bottled, could possibly create world peace. And I just get it because, when you're at a show, all the energy is being channeled
Yeah,
up, and
yeah.
it's so powerful. And it just made me think of there's power in numbers. That is a perfect example. There's energy and power in numbers. So the connection there is you being able to shine a light on TBI awareness, advocacy, connect with Love Your Brain, and everyone who's connected with Love Your Brain. There's power in numbers. So the more
Exactly.
people who are able to benefit from this resource, benefit from your book, and benefit from your story,
Yeah.
that will create world peace. That will, whether it's in
I
pockets or whether
I
it's
I
across the board.
completely agree, and I to add to that, something I found out not too long ago is, in um, group meditation, or group, uh, anything within a shared common thing like a concert or a drum circle or something like that, they have proven that all hearts beat the same. They've proven that it all connects, and all hearts will start to beat at the same rhythm, which that's your connection, right? That's 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 something that happens that we never see, but we feel it. And so it's the same type of thing with getting involved with this community. And it's funny how it's connected to yoga and breathing and meditation, all that stuff. It all connects back to your heart. So I thought that is, I think, is your weaving of those two things. The other thing I was going to bring up about the creativity and the possibilities and all that stuff is, like, I never ever thought I would write a book. Like, that is like something that was well past anything I ever thought possible. And I said earlier in our discussion that, I struggled a lot with confronting what I went through until I wrote a book. And I think that's why, because I went past something I thought was impossible in writing that. And now I'm writing another one. And so that is like, it just takes you that much further down a path where things are exceptionally plausible, and
Yeah. And
it
it's,
opens your mind up to so much more.
and the fact that you said earlier on that you didn't expect it to be so much mind focused in your second book, love when that happens, because that's what's supposed to happen, right? You know that
Right,
you're on the,
right.
you're on the right path when you say yes to something that surfaces that you didn't expect it to be the
Right.
focus, like totally. And it makes sense because you faced a fear. It's so cliche and true. You faced a fear going through this one process of writing this one book, and how cathartic it was. And at moments probably terrifying, and at moments probably really fun. and then you stretch your comfort zone. So of course now you can write another one. You know, it's going to be
Right.
different. You're going to hit different challenges. Yeah, you were able to see that you can do it. And
Right.
to give a plug here too, because I know Scripter Publishing was huge in this. Kelly Watson was huge in this. She's going to be on at the top of 2022 talking about the cathartic process of
Awesome.
writing a book. So you'll probably hear your name in that one, Bernie.
Awesome. I
Without
love
a
Kelly.
doubt. But thank you so much for
Well, speaking of angels, Kelly is an angel too.
mm,
Like she was absolutely instrumental in me writing this book. Like she was my soundboard, you know, and she saw so many iterations of the book as it developed. And oddly enough, I'm writing this one without her help, which has to say something for her, is that I don't think I need her help, or anyone's help for that matter. Although I'm pulling a lot from other people, but you know, understand what I'm saying is that, you know, she gave me the a power that she has, and that
yes.
was pretty cool.
And that's the point. That's the
Yeah,
point for you to be able to sail off on your own. So I can second that by a gazillion about Kelly for sure.
yeah,
And
she's amazing.
and so are you, for real, like just being able to share your story so candidly and openly, and just to refresh everybody, to be able to buy your book, to be able to give back to Love Your Brain. If they want to do both, then the time frame is now through January 1st, 2022,
Correct.
right? And they can do that all, if you could just say where they can learn more about you, where they can buy the book, where they can donate, where can they do all that?
Findwonderintheordinary.com is your easiest way to connect to everything. You can also, if you are local, you can buy it at the Artisans Corner, and the proceeds from there will go as well. It's also in Cazenovia at 20 East. I'm doing the same thing with them. But otherwise, just get it online, and all that stuff will go directly to Love Your Brain.
Incredible. Bernie, thank you so much for hopping back in the closet for such an important message, and to be able to get the word out in such an incredible organization. And have a very Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays with your fam.
You too. You too. Thank you. Thank
Sure
you.
thing.